Hi. So I already did a video today about kind of my story of how I ended up uh, wanting to cut out processed food and refined sugar from uh, what I eat. And so I'll have a link down below to that if you want kind of the story, and then also the results that I had from cutting out processed food and refined sugar for over a year now. I actually started April 23rd, 2011, and it's June 1st of 2012, craziness. And although I've had some lapses along the way and I have eaten some processed food and have had some refined sugar since then, overall I am still continuing wanting to cut that out predominantly from my diet. So that's really fun. Now, what I wanted to do for this video was what exactly is processed food, what things to avoid, and what to look for, just to kind of give you a basic idea of a starting ground, I guess. Just something to start off with if you are contemplating or if you definitely know you want to cut out processed food and refined sugar. So what is processed food? Processed food, you can kind of think of it in two ways. The first way, which is a little bit more of the extreme way, is basically anything that comes in a package is processed. This would even include like brown rice, or if even like fruits and vegetables that are like fresh that would be in packaging, or frozen fruits and vegetables. So that I think is a little bit more extreme. The idea that I like to think of more when it comes to what is processed food is the idea that if you look at an ingredient list and you do not see, if you see a ingredient that you don't recognize, then that means that is definitely processed. If you see tomato on an ingredient list, you're going to be able to visually think of what a tomato looks like. But propylene glycol or artificial flavoring or coloring that's added, you're not going to be able to visually think of what that is in its raw form. And so I think that is a big indicator of whether something is really extremely processed or not. Even some things that you can visually recognize, all of the ingredients on the list, can be much more processed than I would personally buy or eat, but that doesn't mean that you wouldn't have, like, you would have to not eat it too. The nice thing about the processed food and like cutting out processed food and refined sugar is that you decide how far you go with it. It's not a set thing of what can you and can you not eat. This is just more guidelines that I personally follow. And it also depends, like if you're a vegetarian or vegan, you're going to probably eat a little bit differently than I do. Or if you have any kind of food allergies, you're also going to probably eat a little bit different than I do too. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, what do I eat? I eat fruits, I eat vegetables, typically like fresh produce, although I do, especially in the winter, typically buy like frozen peas or frozen spinach, and I mean that's okay, although I'm not a huge fan of it coming in plastic packaging, but I mean there's only so much you can do about that. So for produce, I also am a huge I also eat organic dairy, and I think that that's a huge thing that people should really switch to, even if you can't eat, like I don't even eat 100% organic food, and that's like the ideal, to eat completely certified organic food. But even if you can't, if you can only switch one thing over to certified organic, like one group of foods, I would definitely say organic milk. I would definitely say dairy. Dairy is the hugest thing. I think that people, that's definitely the first thing to switch over. Even if you can't afford anything else, that's okay. This is the main thing, especially if you have like little kids, because artificial growth hormones is going to possibly contribute to early puberty, and especially in girls. And also the other thing too is that those extra hormones aren't good for really anyone to be exposed to. And also, if you or someone you know has a lot of issues with acne, that's actually something that could be contributing to it. And for me, what really helped was when I switched completely over to organic dairy, and also when I limited the amount of dairy that I ate in a day. I went from eating 3 to 6 servings a day because I loved cheese, I loved yogurt, I loved milk, and I went to more like having 2, maybe 3 servings a day, and that has really helped. And the other thing that really grosses me out about conventional dairy, now that I've realized it, and I realized this right probably within the first month that I had switched over to cutting out processed food and refined sugar and trying to majorly only eat real food, because that's the whole thing, that you're wanting to eat real food, what it really is food, not food like substance does, which is basically what processed food is. But the thing that really grossed me out was the fact that for some reason, all the milk that I was getting for a while there kept spoiling. And it would be like, it wouldn't be that I was buying it and then like like really close to the expiration date. It was the fact that I would buy it and it was supposed to have like another week or something, and I would have just bought it and opened it, and the next day it would be bad, it would be sour, and I didn't understand what was going on. And this was the generic brand of milk. This was also the Swiss brand of milk, and I think some other brand, but I can't remember at this point. But I didn't understand what was going on. And then the one day, like, I finally switched to Swiss, and I finally found like a half gallon that actually didn't go bad. And as I was drinking it, I had become more and more like automatically looking at ingredient lists, which is a huge thing about trying to cut out processed food and refined sugar, or even just trying to cut out just a couple ingredients that really aren't good for anyone to be consuming. Ingredient list reading is very, very important when it comes to food or personal care products. The thing that I saw the one day when I was just like kind of drinking milk and just was like, oh, there's some ingredients, I'll read them, was the fact that in the Swiss milk was, not only was it regular milk, but it was also dry milk. Dry milk was in the milk. I didn't know how to take that. I could not understand why dry milk was in the milk. Like, it takes so much more energy of the earth and the environment to take milk, dry it out, and then to put it back into milk. It was just not cool, because every single time I was drinking, it's just like, ew, I'm drinking dry milk in my milk. And the way that you can actually tell, because technically, because it is dry milk is still milk, the only way, they don't have to put that in the ingredient list. So that was nice of Swiss to put that, but to find that out is, I believe it's either, if there's more than 8 or 9 grams of protein per serving of milk, that means that there's dry milk in that. I can't quite remember what the exact number is, but if you're getting certified organic, I don't think that's a really big issue. But like I said, gross. That just, I don't know, that freaked me out. I'm not sure if other people would be upset by that or not, but that upset me. So like I said, organic dairy, huge thing to switch over to. And what else? I also was still eating carbs. I think that carbs are, and I'm still eating carbs. I think carbs is a huge thing to still be eating. It's not something to be avoided. And so what did I eat? I ate brown rice, whole wheat pasta. Oh, what else? Whole wheat bread if homemade. I also, due to stomach issues, not originally when I first started, but now I do have eat homemade white bread. What else? Also oatmeal. I eat a lot of oatmeal, not instant and not the minute rice or anything like that. I actually get the rice that you have to cook for anywhere from 30 to 50 minutes, depending on which brand it is. You don't really want parboiled rice, which means it's partially boiled, if you're going the whole no processed food route. And what's the other thing? Oatmeal. You don't want the instant oatmeal. Like, it can cook all that oatmeal, and the rice is just that you're just cooking it for a little bit longer. It's not any more work than the minute rice or the instant rice. And actually, especially with the rice, that actually surprised me. I'm like, wow, it's really just that you cook it for an extra 20 minutes. That's the only difference. 20, half an hour, 40 minutes. I mean, like, really? That's it? I was expecting a lot more work than that. So that's the carbs. When I first started, I actually just ate the meat that I was eating before I cut out processed food. So, except I did cut out deli meats and deli cheese, just because those are so processed. They're just so processed. That's really not something that's healthy in any way. And tons of sodium right there. So, however, now because I started having trouble with IBS again. That's another time story, but another story for another time. But I ended up trying. My mom and I ended up talking, and we decided that we would try meat from a local farmer, and I actually ended up not having any issues with that. And part of it is, too, that I actually ended up, originally, a couple years back, before I even was diagnosed with IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, I actually had major issues with eggs, and what confused me was that I would sometimes be okay with eggs, and then other times I would be seriously just in so much pain and pretty much agony, and I would have no idea why I would be okay with sometimes and not be okay other times. And what I really kind of figured it out was that my sister's husband's brother I know, right? And his family. So basically, my brother-in-law's middle brother's family keeps chickens. Not during the winter, but during the rest of the year. And I would sometimes eat those eggs, and I was actually fine on those eggs. But the eggs that were bought in stores, conventional eggs, I had horrible trouble with. And I actually never put that together until I randomly read some blog post. I really wish I knew which blog post it was, but somebody actually talked about how they were not okay with that. And like, they'd be okay with farm fresh eggs, but they were not okay with store-bought eggs. And so I did end up trying certified organic eggs that are store-bought, just to see if they would be okay. And I was so worried. And people, if any of you are like, oh, well, you thought you'd be fine, so you were fine. I was terrified, absolutely terrified and worried sick that I would get sick off of these certified organic eggs. And I was so ecstatic, along with my parents and probably everyone else who knew that I was doing this, that I actually felt okay on certified organic eggs. So that's another thing that I think that even if you can't switch all of your meat over to either grass-fed or certified organic, or even just like a local farmer, raising the meat, even if you could just switch to certified organic eggs and certified organic milk, I think that that can make a huge difference. So that if you can switch two things, I would say certified organic eggs is another huge thing if you consume eggs. What else? The other thing that I think is a major thing too is that you want to like consume nuts, like, or some sort of protein. If you are vegetarian or vegan, I would definitely recommend definitely consuming nuts, because that is a natural source of saturated fat, but there's also, like, I believe coconuts and avocados have saturated fat too. But you really want to make sure that you're getting the amount of like vitamins and minerals that you need. And so, yeah, that's the stuff that I typically consume on a day-to-day basis. The fruits, vegetables, some rice. Typically I eat rice and oatmeal, organic milk, some organic eggs, and then grass-fed local beef or certified organic eggs, something like that. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that you only want to consume a palm size, 2 palm sizes of meat a day. A lot of Americans kind of assume that, oh, a chicken breast is this huge, so that means it's a serving size. And actually that's not. That's typically 2, if not 3 serving sizes. And that really leads to a lot more cholesterol than really anyone needs. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So what are some of the things that you want to avoid if you are avoiding sugar? So what you want to do if you're avoiding refined sugar is you want to cut out artificial sweeteners. And this also includes if it says on the ingredient list sucrose, that is also considered an artificial sweetener, although technically that is like the chemical name for sugar. That actually on the ingredient list is a name for an artificial sweetener. So don't get fooled by that, although there's tons of other artificial sweeteners as well. And just because you don't think you consume artificial sweeteners doesn't mean that it's actually not in a product, because in processed food, even if they have high fructose corn syrup in it, which is the typical processed sugar that is in a lot of processed foods, just because corn and soy are the 2 highest subsidized crops, just because it has high fructose corn syrup does not mean that it doesn't have artificial sweeteners in it. Just because it's not sugar-free, that like doesn't claim it's sugar-free, does not mean that there's not artificial sweetener in it. So just keep that in mind. Another thing you want to avoid is high fructose corn syrup, and then overall, again, just the refined sugar. You don't really want to consume that as well. And the other things that you want to avoid, sorry, I have my list on the computer because I didn't feel like having it written down, but you want to avoid trans fat because technically companies are legally allowed to essentially lie to the consumer. By the FDA, they're allowed to. And by saying that, like, they can say that or advertise that there's 0 grams of trans fat in a product, in a food product, and when in actuality they have 0.4 grams of trans fat or lower per serving. And so if you're wondering why the serving is like 1 cracker, 2 crackers, that's probably and it claims 0 grams trans fat, that's probably the reason why it's such a low serving size, because they don't want to have to admit that there's actually trans fat. So how do we know if there's actually trans fat, if they're essentially lying on the nutrition facts label? Well, you have to look at ingredients. Like with everything else with processed food, or even like personal care products or anything, you have to look at the ingredient list. If on the ingredient list that is listed either hydrogenated something oil or partially hydrogenated something oil, and it could be, for example, hydrogenated soybean oil or partially hydrogenated canola oil. If it says any kind of hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils, then that's your indication that there is trans fat there, even if the company is saying there's none. And the frustrating thing is that, like, for example, pretend I have got a craving for crackers. Let's pretend I'm not trying to avoid processed food, and I'm just really, really hungry for crackers. And who eats 2 crackers? And that's a serving size. But you know what? I felt like eating 10. So if it claimed that there was no trans fat there, but in actuality there was 0.4 grams there, I would have already consumed about 2 grams of trans fat, even without trying. I would have been like, oh yay, I didn't consume any trans fat, and like feel proud of myself because I didn't consume any trans fat, and yet in actuality I actually consumed tons of trans fat. And if you're wondering what the big deal about trans fat is, because trans fat is not really a fat that we typically talk about. There's 3 types of fats. There's unsaturated fat, saturated fat, and trans fat. The 2 that are naturally occurring are unsaturated fat and saturated fat. The man-made fat is the trans fat. Now, the healthiest fat of the 3 is unsaturated fat. Unsaturated fat at room temperature is liquid, and so a good example of that is olive oil. The next one is saturated fat. Saturated fat is not considered nearly as healthy as unsaturated fat, but we still need some amounts of saturated fat for our body to function. And saturated fat at room temperature is solid. So a good example of saturated fat is butter. When it comes to trans fat is unsaturated fat, which is liquid at room temperature, and altered in such a way so that then it's actually solid at room temperature. So a good example of trans fat is Crisco, shortening, margarine, stuff like that. And they're not healthy at all. And that's one of the things that whether you're trying to cut out processed food or whether you're just trying to eat healthier, is the fact that just because some food or some product claims to be healthier does not mean it's actually healthy. So for example, margarine is actually not healthier than butter. Margarine is actually very harmful. It's a lot worse for your arteries to consume any amount of trans fat than to have a little bit of saturated fat every single day. So I think that trans fat is just one of those things that everyone really needs to be aware of and really need to avoid, actively avoid. And because there's this allowability, I suppose, I'm not sure if I just made up that word or not, but that the FDA allows companies to say, oh yeah, I have 0 grams trans fat in this product, and in actuality have trans fat there, I think that makes it a lot more difficult for people. So it just, again, boils down to you have to really, really read the ingredients. So now the other thing to, the other ingredients to overall avoid include artificial flavoring, artificial coloring, natural flavoring. Just because it says natural flavoring does not mean it's actually any safer. Propylene glycol, that's actually something that is in a lot of foods, and it's also in a lot of personal care products. And although there's argument over whether or not it causes acne, I do kind of believe that it can at least contribute to acne. So especially if you are either someone who has acne-prone skin or has acne, I think that's something to actively avoid in your skincare products and also in your food. I don't think kids should be eating it either. But also fake coloring, enriched flours, or any kind of enriched cereals, or the fun thing that I saw recently was enriched cookies, and they were basically claiming that these Oreo-like cookies were just as healthy as eating fruit. And I'm like, are you serious? But when it says enriched flours, it basically means that that product, that flour or whatever it is, has been stripped so much, it has been processed just so much that all the beneficial vitamins and minerals that were originally in them are no longer there. And so typically when it comes to like bread or cereals that have their flour or the base of it completely really processed, they'll add vitamins and minerals to them to make it seem healthy or a healthier choice. And that is not true. That is not the case, and that is something that you want to completely avoid. The other thing is just anything that has any added vitamins or minerals, it's just basically the same thing. That just means that it's really processed. When it comes to soybean oil, soy lecithin, basically anything soy, you really want to be careful. And when it comes to vegetarians and vegans, I know that you guys eat a lot of like tofu and soy milk, and I would really recommend for you to consume certified organic soy. And you'll find out in a minute why if you don't already know. Now for the rest of you, a lot of you are probably like, oh, I don't eat soy, or oh, I just occasionally eat edamame and that's it. If you're consuming any processed food, and this was something that irked me so much when I found this out, was that if you're eating pretty much any processed food, most likely we're actually consuming tons of soy without even knowing it. And this was not true 5 to 10 years ago. 5 to 10 years ago, it was just you had to really be careful about high fructose corn syrup, because I constantly would look and like my mom would be like, okay, you and your sister look for bread, like store-bought bread that doesn't have high fructose corn syrup. And that was like the goal. And we'd always find maybe one loaf of the entire bread aisle that did not have high fructose corn syrup in it. Now it is practically impossible to find a bread that does not have high fructose corn syrup in it or soybean oil in it, because those are the two things that are so subsidized that they're in all processed food. And that's part of the reason why processed food compared to real food is actually depending on the thing. Sometimes it's a little bit more expensive, other times it's a lot more expensive. It's because the government subsidizes corn and soy crops and makes it so that then farmers can actually sell their crops for less than the amount of money that they actually put into farming that crop. So that's something to keep in mind. But why? Why do we want to avoid corn and soy and also canola oil, which is another thing? It's because they're all, well, about 90% of those crops that are conventionally grown, not organically grown, a minimum of 90% of them are actually GMO. What does that mean? It means that the plant itself has been genetically modified at a genetic level, as the name suggests, and it means that what they can do with that is they can make it so that then the plant is more drought resistant, or that it withstands like pesticides better. They can actually make it so that then the plant is so resistant to pesticides that they can spray really strong pesticides on a field, completely kill everything else off on that field, and that plant will still thrive. So that is something to really be aware of and kind of concerned of. I am concerned about that. And the thing too about GMOs is the fact that we don't know what that can do health-wise. And but even just the higher amount of pesticide use is not good for anyone. That is something that I really try to avoid. And another reason that you really want to be aware of the amount of soy that you're consuming is that the fact that just overall for people, some claim it's more harmful for males, other claims it's more harmful for females, but overall it's just the fact that by consuming so much soy actually mimics estrogen in the body, and so you're actually going to have higher levels of estrogen in the body. It's actually affecting your hormones, and that's not necessarily a good thing if you're not purposely trying to do that. Now, the things to be looking for that have healthy or healthier reputations, but that actually don't necessarily have healthier reputations, or actually just don't, is margarine, shortening, which both, again, it's due to the trans fat that are there, and just trans fat is something to be avoided completely. It's better to have a little bit of butter than any amount of margarine in your life. The next thing is, if you're buying or consuming wheat products that have 0 grams of fiber, it means that's actually extremely processed. You want to preferably have at least 2 grams of fiber in any wheat product, whether that's wheat pasta, wheat bread, if you would happen to buy that, anything wheat. Next thing is white bread. I actually am not a huge fan of white bread, but if you're home making bread, if it's white bread, then it's okay. But if you're buying store-bought bread, I would definitely recommend more wheat bread or something like that. There are sometimes 1 or 2 loaves in that huge aisle of bread that are certified organic, and I would definitely recommend that over any of the others. It will still probably have soybean oil in it, but it probably will not have high fructose corn syrup, and at least it will be certified organic soybean oil. So theoretically anyway, it will not be GMO unless it's been accidentally contaminated on the field, like cross-pollinated accidentally with GMO crops. And then white rice. Brown rice is just a lot better of a carb. It doesn't turn into energy as quickly, so it's going to make you feeling fuller longer. Same with white pasta. You really want to have like wheat pasta or whole grain pasta if you're going to be consuming pasta. And you really also do not want to have any kind of foods that are instant. So like instant oatmeal or minute rice. You want to have, just take the extra half an hour or 40 minutes to cook the actual brown rice yourself. And all that means is it's just going to spend that much more time on the stove. It doesn't mean that you have to do any more work. It just means that little bit longer till you can eat it. And with oatmeal, instead of it being done in a minute, it'll be done in 10 minutes. So, I mean, even with that, that's even a shorter amount of time. And you want to make sure to avoid parboiled rice, because that means that it's been partially boiled. You want to have just rice. And you also want to, let's see what else. When it comes to what you want to look for, like I said before, you want to look for wheat that has at least 2 grams of fiber in it. You also want to, like I said before, just imagine, look for ingredients in listings that you can visualize, that you can imagine instantly. Like back to that tomato. If you can visualize it, then it's okay. And overall, with the no processed food, no refined sugar, aka the real food challenge, is the whole idea that the fresher the food is and the less packaging it is, the better. If you can buy organic produce from your local farmers market and local farmers, that's just so much better than just buying frozen fruits and vegetables if you can. And you also want to definitely, I think I already mentioned this, but just have 2 palm-sized portions of meat a day, ideally. And you want to then the rest of the protein get more from like nuts or something like that. You don't want to be consuming tons and tons of meat, because that'll overall make you healthier too, and especially if you're still going to be eating conventional meats that are like Perdue or I can't think of the others, but just if you're buying meat at a grocery store, then you want to be more careful about it, especially. Um, what else? Just because it is a lot of conventionally raised meats, and also meat in like restaurants and fast food joints, they're going to have been most likely given antibiotics even if they weren't sick. It's a preventative measure done by a lot of farmers, but that is not necessarily a good thing. It also makes it a lot, it makes it so that then we, the consumers, are consuming a lot of antibiotics without even realizing it. And so that really isn't good for our health, the animal's health, or the environment's health, that we're consuming more antibiotics and not even realizing it. And the other thing too is that grocery store bought meat typically is not on their traditional food source, like cows and stuff. And that's another reason to go to organic dairy, is the fact that they're probably consuming corn, which is actually not a natural food for cows to be eating. The cows are traditionally fed grass. Most likely the corn that they're feeding the cows are not certified organic corn. It's most likely GMO. So you're getting not only antibiotics, but then you're also getting GMOs through the meat that you're eating without even realizing it. So that's another thing to be just kind of realize, and another reason why you want to lower your amount of meat that you're consuming. But with all of this, you still want to make sure that you're actually consuming enough sodium. This is something that I did not think about. Well, I did think about it a little bit, but I initially thought that I was consuming enough salt. I thought that the meat that I was consuming, the dairy that I was consuming, and the nuts that I was consuming all equaled enough sodium in a day for me, and I found out the hard way that that was not the case. I ended up waking up one morning with horrible leg cramp in my left calf, and so that is something to realize, that most Americans do get way too much sodium in a day, and most of that sodium comes from processed food. And if we're eliminating that processed food, then that means that we have to be aware of how much sodium we're getting in a day. And you also want to be careful about how much potassium you're getting in a day, because that was another thing that I thought I was getting enough potassium and I was not. But overall, the thing that is ideal, like I can't even do this yet and I hope to someday, and is the fact that you really want to ideally eat most food that is certified organic, preferably locally grown and raised. But this is the whole reason, because then there's not as many chemical harmful pesticides on it. Just because it's certified organic does not mean that pesticides are not used, but it means that there's safer pesticides being used, if pesticides are being used. And it also means that then antibiotics are not being used as a preventative measure. Artificial growth hormones are not used. It just overall means that you are getting better quality food. And so that's something to aspire to. I know most families and most people are not financially able to do that, and I completely understand that. I am very lucky that my parents have been very supportive of me cutting out processed food and refined sugar from my diet. I know that a lot of families aren't necessarily going to be supportive about that. And so, I mean, it's just do what you can. Do what you can. So, yeah, if you have any questions about anything that I've been talking about in this video regarding what's okay to eat, what is processed food, what is not okay, what do I try to avoid, anything like that, please comment in the comment section down below, and I'll see you later. Bye!